Well, hello everyone. Talk about right here. Talk about the have right here is it the sketch right here, and you see right here of talking about for whenever it comes to if I want to say comes to I'm like yeah some of these drawings that I've had to present right here, but one of them would be is this right here, and like anybody probably thinking too is that that right there is supposed to be a girlfriend or just somebody that you sketched even for Valentine's Day and half the time it sure seems that way to where that yeah for Valentine's Day that you go ahead and work on a sketch right here and with this sketch right here that you go ahead and draw a picture of somebody in particular. I'm like yeah I'm like if you're gonna be sketching a friend of yours or maybe just somebody that you met or I'm like yeah it could be a cousin or a family member that you drawing and so a lot of times it sure seems that way that yeah if you're going to be doing any sorts of drawings though a lot of times it's like what does that mean or what is that supposed to be, what's that for, but so you have right here I'm talking about with that the drawing right here, but I want to also talk about pretty please and so it sure seems that way that what does it usually mean whenever people go by that source of phrase, such as pretty please. And a lot of times they would put a smile on their face like that. And a lot of times, what does that usually mean whenever you do say pretty please about something? And I guess sometimes it usually says to where somebody asks very politely. And so, anybody say, I'm like, and another thing I want to talk about too is like, yeah, ever since I was a little kid, these were the things that I wanted to do and, opportunities that came up. I'm like, yeah, write a book or maybe you invent something, something like that. And also, if anybody here has seen this right here, this right here is actually something about the elections right here. Like I talk about for women's rights and all that, and made in USA right here, if we can all see that right there. So it sure seems that way that a lot of things that they talk about on the news now, and that you're thinking too, is that really that made in the USA and like yeah, made in America, for made in America, and then as well as like if it's a bill of rights or anything like that they're going to be talking about, so far as for politics and as well as Democrats and the Republicans. So, but you have right here talk about this drawing right here. And also, but I mainly want to talk about for pretty please though. What does it usually mean when somebody says something like, pretty please? And so I mainly, I want to go ahead and talk about this right here too. I talk about like, yeah, mother and daughter, they're going to be relaxing in front of a campfire, something like that. So yeah, you got this drawing right here. But usually that, yeah, I for pretty please though that the way that kids look at their parents a lot of times too, it sure seems that way for pretty please. And but still that I know that whenever it comes to drawing though, that especially whenever it comes to Valentine's Day, that it sure seems that way to where that yeah, whenever you say pretty please about something, and it sure seems that way to where that yeah, that person, somebody's begging you for something or asking you to do something. And so a lot of times it's like yeah, that if the word please is just another way of how do you want to say it, is like to a free call for free will. It's like it's a request. And so let's just say that yeah, if a person's been good, if they've been good all week long or something like that, and then you can if they really wanted something from the store, or maybe ask you that if they can go somewhere, do something, something like that. But you have right here, I talk about with pretty please right here, and so I'll go ahead and show everybody here that with this drawing right here, that if I were to be doing working on something, and anybody thinking too is that yeah, that if you're going to be sketching something especially, and people would like to look at what you're working on, and so it sure seems that way that yeah, other than talk about the inventions and everything, that it sure seems that way that yeah, that whenever you start working on something, it's like, yeah, that the first thing that might come to your mind, of course, is that if you're going to be watching somebody color something on a TV show, it sure seems that way that, okay, do you want to go ahead and give that a try, if this makes any sense of it. So a lot of times, when we think about artwork, though, a lot of times, that do we necessarily think about is as to where that when we think about artwork, that's something that really becomes appealing to you, and so it's like yeah, that if something that kind of approaches your attention, and so it sure seems that way to where that number one, if you're trying to draw something for somebody for Valentine's Day, and let's just say if you're trying to invite them to a dance or something like that, and you want to try to picture about what how this person is going to look at you like, and if I was thinking too is to where would you please come to the game with me, or would you please go to the dance with me, something like that. And so it sure seems that way that whenever you do approach by that look and by that source of attention, though, that a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever you do talk to somebody and ask somebody something, that what's their remark about that. And so it sure seems that way toward it that is that really about drawing how you feel, and then knowing about whenever you do present a drawing like that, and people thinking as to what exactly were you thinking about during that time. But I could probably thinking too is that that whenever it comes to saying talk about for made in America, and then other things that you hear about even on the news, though, and a lot of times it sure seems that way that the first thing that I you kind of like talk about is that to where that number one, though, is that the fact of the matter is that between the jobs that are considered for boys and for girls, and anything like that, people say that yeah, well, of course, but then the dogs would get the morning paper or something like that. So it sure seems that way that that almost everybody else might even say too is that yeah, if you want to kind of start the conversation, other than pretty please, you want to start the conversation by stating as to where that how do you know for which jobs there are for boys and for girls, and also other things that they talk about on the news especially, but I just really want to talk about right here is just knowing about whenever you actually draw a masterpiece of something right like this right here. And so it sure seems that way that when if I were to be looking at artwork like this right here, that what exactly does that remind me of? Well, it reminds me actually a lot of whenever I think about that, I'm like, yeah, like somebody, I'm like, yeah, their first year of kindergarten, or it could also maybe be about from the prom dance or something like that. Yeah, paintings though. So whenever I think about paintings, though, that almost everybody else might say that yeah, it's not really the same thing as a picture. Pictures actually taken developed by that photographer and from that event and all. But whenever you put together a picture right here, a portrait, a picture right here, that that the source of skills that you're actually showing is like the freehand work, the type of illustration work, putting that together, the looks and all that, the details together. And so you have right here is this bow right here, but so a lot of times it sure seems that way that and I noticed that about a lot of jobs is that yeah, if you have anybody, customers or clients that are going to be coming into the doors between certain times of the hour, and they ask you to go ahead and draw something or paint something, or I'm like, oh yeah, do like small favors or something like that. So it sure seems that way to where that that a lot of times that whenever it comes to doing something, or I'm like, oh yeah, somebody puts a request, asks a request for something, about how many times out of a month though that you might see that, but I actually see right here this painting right here, I should say this illustration drawing right here, and what I actually see right here is that if I were to be drawing this right here, working this painting right here, and like everybody else might even say too, is to where that if you can draw something like that, do you think that would maybe be able to approach a lot of ladies' attention? And let's just say that yeah, that you go ahead and draw something, and sometimes it sure seems that way that you may not even show that person right away, just because you just don't know what they're going to think whenever they actually see it. And so that's why it sure seems that way that whenever we think about a drawing like this right here, and just like say, you go ahead and show it to somebody, and when I say, okay, who's that supposed to be? What's it for? But really though, but talking about right here, of like whenever it comes to the stuff that I enjoyed since I was a kid. Actually, I think that's one topic that I want to talk about mainly. Is that since I was a kid, since I was about 12 years old, that I like putting together puzzles and like doing other sorts of activities. And one thing that really approached my attention, though, that a lot of other classmates, kind of got their attention too, is that whenever you do draw a picture of something, that it sure seems that way, that you want to go ahead and you don't really tell them how you drew it, but it sure seems that way that they want to actually look at the skills, the talent. And so a lot of times, and I can tell everybody here too, that a lot of times it was during recess time, that a lot of times that at the school, that a lot of the kids were always fascinated about my artwork and other things that were going. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, you would go ahead and draw something freehand, and a lot of kids were pretty impressed about it. But there are some times, and I can tell everybody here too, there are some times to where that maybe a few people that that might be pretty impressed with something, or stuff. So it sure seems that way, that art is not art is not easy though. I guess the fact of the matter about artwork though, it sure seems that way, to where that if you want to try to get into like maybe one of those art contests, if you want to get into a contest or something like that, and it sure seems that way that almost everybody else might even think too, is to where about your artwork though, your artwork for how it's presented also, is that there might be some situation about the artwork though, is to where well, the face or the lips and all that, the face don't look right, or something that don't look like, or they want to see improvements. And so really, that whenever you whenever you do a masterpiece of an art, some sort of artwork though, that the first thing that a lot of art, like all the other artists will probably say too, that you weren't tracing the picture. I'm like, yeah, you were working on this at your own time. So, besides if it's a drawing or maybe any sort of necklace or a bracelet or something like that, that it sure seems that way, to where that, whenever you do draw something, that you want